There is something especially explosive about a relationship story when nobody is completely sure where they stand. Love becomes complicated, loyalty becomes negotiable, and every new encounter has the potential to expose a secret that someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. That is exactly the emotional territory explored in Love with Two Women, Episode 3 of Put a Ring on It, Cheat Hab Season 1. And while the episode itself centers on couples navigating outside dating, its themes fit perfectly into the kind of emotional warfare that fans of the bold and the beautiful understand so well. The central question is not simply who is dating whom. The deeper question is whether a relationship can survive once one partner discovers that the other person's heart is still divided. The episode creates that tension by allowing the women to continue exploring relationships outside their primary partnerships while simultaneously forcing them to confront people from their partner's romantic pasts. What begins as an experiment in honesty quickly becomes a test of trust, insecurity, jealousy, and emotional control. That is where the drama becomes particularly fascinating. At first glance, continuing to date outside the primary relationship might appear to be a controlled experiment. The participants know the rules. They know that their partners are also being placed in uncomfortable situations. In theory, everyone should understand that difficult conversations and unexpected emotions are part of the process. But emotions rarely follow rules. The moment a participant encounters a former lover, an ex-partner, or someone who once occupied a secret place in their partner's life, the experiment becomes much more personal. Suddenly, the past is no longer the past. It is standing directly in front of them. This is one of the strongest elements of Episode 3. The women are not merely being asked to evaluate their current relationships. They are being forced to look at the history behind those relationships. And sometimes, the history reveals things that are much more uncomfortable than anyone expected. The outside dating continues, and that alone creates a complicated emotional atmosphere. Every date introduces another possibility. Every conversation has the potential to create an emotional connection. And every new connection forces the participants to ask whether their original relationship is truly strong enough to survive temptation. For the women, the situation is particularly challenging because they are simultaneously trying to discover what they want while dealing with the consequences of what their partners have done in the past. That creates an important distinction between physical attraction and emotional attachment. A person can claim that an ex means nothing anymore. They can say that the relationship ended for a reason. They can insist that they have moved on. But if their behavior tells a different story, their current partner is going to notice. And that is exactly why the bombshell confession involving lingering feelings for an ex becomes so important. One of the men admits that he is still in love with his former partner. That revelation changes the emotional meaning of everything that happened before it. It is one thing to admit that an ex still has a place in your memories. It is something entirely different to acknowledge that you are still in love with that person. Love is not a minor leftover emotion. If someone is still in love with an ex while participating in a relationship experiment designed to strengthen or clarify their current relationship, then the current relationship suddenly becomes questionable. The obvious question becomes, how can a person fully commit to the future when part of their heart is still living in the past? That question is devastating because there may not be an easy answer. The confession also demonstrates why honesty can be both healing and destructive. On one hand, telling the truth is necessary. On the other hand, the truth can destroy the emotional security that existed before the confession. This is where the episode becomes more than a story about dating. It becomes a story about emotional consequences. The women are being asked to make decisions while simultaneously receiving information that could completely change those decisions. Imagine believing that your relationship is moving towards something more serious, only to discover that your partner still has romantic feelings for someone else. Suddenly, every affectionate moment becomes suspicious. Every promise is questioned. Every future plan becomes uncertain. Was the relationship genuine? Was the partner settling? Was the current relationship simply an attempt to replace the old one? Those questions can consume someone. And this is where the emotional world of the bold and the beautiful comes into focus. In the world of daytime drama, love triangles rarely remain simple. One person loves another person who is emotionally connected to someone else, while a former partner waits in the background. The result is not merely romantic competition. It becomes psychological warfare. Episode 3 captures that same dynamic. The former flames are especially important because they represent unfinished business. An ex is dangerous not necessarily because that person is trying to steal someone away, but because an ex already knows the person on an intimate level. They know the history. They know the weaknesses. They know the mistakes. They may know exactly what to say to trigger old feelings. That makes a face-to-face confrontation incredibly powerful. The women are forced to meet people who may have known their partners before they did. That can create an immediate sense of comparison. Am I better for him? Does he still think about her? What did she have that I don't? Does he compare us? These questions may never be spoken aloud, but they can become impossible to ignore. And jealousy becomes especially dangerous when there is already uncertainty. A confident person can sometimes dismiss an ex as irrelevant. But when trust has already been damaged, even a harmless interaction can feel threatening. That emotional pressure appears to contribute heavily to Dominique's explosive reaction. Dominique completely loses her temper when she encounters someone from Travis' past. Her reaction is significant because anger is often the visible expression of a deeper emotion. Beneath anger, there may be fear. Beneath jealousy, there may be insecurity. Beneath confrontation, there may be a desperate desire for reassurance. Dominique's blow-up is therefore more than simply a dramatic moment. It reveals how quickly emotional uncertainty can overwhelm rational thinking. When someone feels threatened in a relationship, they may stop asking what is objectively happening and start reacting to what they fear might happen. That difference is crucial. The person standing in front of Dominique represents Travis' past. But emotionally, that person can symbolize something much larger. The possibility that Dominique may not be enough to hold Travis' heart. That is the real threat. And once that fear takes over, logic becomes difficult. Dominique's loss of control also raises another question. Can a relationship survive when jealousy becomes stronger than communication? A confrontation may provide temporary emotional release, but it rarely solves the underlying problem. If Dominique wants security with Travis, the real solution cannot simply be defeating or humiliating someone from his past. The real solution is understanding Travis' feelings and determining whether he is truly committed to their relationship. That is the painful reality of romantic insecurity. You cannot control who someone loved before you. You cannot erase their memories. You cannot rewrite their history. And you cannot force someone to stop loving an ex simply because you are now their partner. What you can demand is honesty. That is why the confession about still loving an ex is arguably one of the most important moments in the episode. It forces everyone to confront the difference between being physically present and being emotionally available. A person can be sitting beside you every night while mentally living somewhere else. They can tell you they love you while secretly wondering whether they made the wrong choice. They can build a future with you while still hoping the past might return.